Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's Media Roundtable discussion. I am Fiona Alexander Smith, Director of Information for the Government of Montserrat. We are discussing today the Budget Support Mission. As you know, last Thursday, we had a press conference at the end of the Budget Support Mission. And just to mention that the Budget Support Mission is a very, very tightly packed and intense week of meetings and engagements for the Governor, Premier, and the Financial Secretary, and of course, other officials across the government. Now, given the limited time for last week's press conference, the Governor and the Premier requested that we do a follow-up to allow the media to have an opportunity to ask more questions on this very important discussion, and that happened last week, Budget Support Mission 2024. The officials at the table today to respond to your questions are Her Excellency Governor Sarah Tucker, Premier and Minister of Finance, Honorable Joseph E. Farrell, and Financial Secretary, Honorable Lindorna Lambert-Sweeney. I will now hand over to the head table and ask for just some brief remarks in that order. Governor.
Thanks very much, Fiona, and good afternoon, everybody. As we spoke to you last Thursday, we were just wrapping up on the 3 days of intense discussions and debate and roundtable sessions on all of the different financial aid sections. And then on Friday, we had a further meetings that were sort of outside the Budget Support Mission, but still a really big part of it, which was talking about the capital programme, the SIPREG programme, and the UK SIF, where we have the port. And we also took the UK officials down to have a look and see where the port was progressed and the work that's done there. So more discussions then were about what happens next after that. So where do we go next? So we've started that thinking. And again, a big thank you to the PMO and to the Financial Secretary and her team for all of the work they've done in terms of pulling together some of the thinking across the ministries and departments about what happens next on infrastructure. So it was a big week. FCDO colleagues got home over the weekend, so I wait to hear from them in terms of what happens next. We've got some homework to do, I think, just to feed some more figures in. And they've got their work to do in terms of going back to ministers in the UK to then agree what our budget is going forward. But as we said last week, it was a bold ask by us, but I think a very positive one, and we wait to see where that goes. But I'll hand to Premier.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon, everyone. I just want the public to appreciate that the budget support discussions didn't start just last week. It's a long process. We started about a year ago, and intermittently, the team from London and the financial team here meets to discuss the progress and what we need to do. So I think the public need to understand that, because sometimes we think it's just to ask for funds, but the preparation is significant in order to reach the stage where you can present a case to the FCDO, and they in turn would then go and present that case to the Minister and to the Treasury. So it's a long process, and I think we did what we had to do. The budget review took place a few months ago, and then last week, of course, because you will recall that the Government of Montserrat have identified 5 priority areas. And the last week's discussion basically functions a lot on those 5 areas. Normally we speak at length, but last week we kind of zero in on these areas. And this is basically what we're doing. Of course, we presented a bowl, as Governor said, a bowl presentation in terms of what we need, what we think we need, and we'll wait and see what the FCDO will come forward. We hope that they come forward with something tangible for us, because there's a lot of work to be done, and a number of areas to be covered, and so we only wait and see.
Good afternoon, everyone. And just to piggyback on what previous speakers said, it was a really successful discussion and successful week, and a lot of preparation has been put into this week. Just want to acknowledge all the efforts of the accounting officers and ministries across government, and especially the Ministry of Finance. This year, we approached it a bit differently. We had very strategic discussions across the 5 policy areas, and just to recognize that the adjustments that ministries had to make within a quick space of time, it was really, that's something that's commendable. We looked at 5 main areas, and we presented, based on the assessment of all the submissions ministries made, we presented a case to the FCDO. As I said, we didn't want to say the details of it, but it's a bold case, and we hope for a successful response in the coming weeks. Thank you.
we would have advertised this as a media roundtable, and we were expecting more members of the media here today. But we do have ZGB here with us. I guess it's a busy week for the media, but we have ZGB here with us, and we will hand over now to Paulisa for her questions. And I may ask 1 or 2 questions as the time goes along. But Paulisa.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
So, as Fiona mentioned, Paulisa Reiner from ZGB News. So, my first question is actually for the Financial Secretary. And you just mentioned that you focused on 5 main areas. Could you give us what the main areas of focus are, please?
Okay, so based on the submissions made by ministries and departments, we discussed areas around access. We discussed education and health transformation. A lot of discussion about capacity and capability across government and the ability to deliver services. We considered discussions around food sovereignty and housing in the agricultural sector. And one of the other discussions we have, given the fact that CIPREG 1, our main capital program, will come to an end in a few years, we are working early to prepare for CIPREG 2, but we recognize that there is a gap between the finalization of CIPREG 1 and the commencement of CIPREG 2. So we discussed a possible bridging facility to provide for services on the capital side during that period.
Okay, and so what is the outlook, the economic outlook for 2024? That's also for you, FS.
So far, based on the data we have from statistics, we expect growth, not significant, but moderate growth in the economy. We note that some projects will be ongoing, so you'll see, based on what's happening on the port project, for instance, there are a lot more bodies, so we expect employment will rise. They have actually been asking for additional employment support. They've an ad out on the radio to attract laborers of all sorts. The hospital project will begin in earnest, and those are 2 large projects that will help boost the construction industry, and we hope will encourage some economic activity. We also know, for instance, because we have the ferry, that the March period should have some activity over a 2-week period, and that we expect also to provide some support in the economy. So we expect the next year to look a little better than this one.
The housing was one of the main focuses that was mentioned just now. I guess this question can be for the Governor and Premier as well. We know that there's been a list of people who are waiting for housing. Has there been any discussion with the FCDO concerning that, and how will that be tackled?
Shall I go first? So just I think when we talked about capacity and capability in its broadest sense, it's also about how do you house people, how do you educate people, how do you make sure that that full package is available for people, both those on island and those visiting the island. So housing is a big part of that. We know that we've got lots of empty shells around the island, but we have a lot of people that are looking for housing support. So that general discussion was there at a strategic level in terms of how do we improve housing and availability of accommodation, and that cuts across to tourism too. What's our offer there? How do we do that? So in its broader strategic sense, yes. Definitely the conversation was there, and then further down, a bit more deep dive. We weren't in the tactical level, so we weren't talking about individuals, but yes, there, some good work that's happened on social housing in the last few months, just doing some things up. But budget is budget. There is a capacity issue there in terms of what funding's available, but also in terms of our capacity to deliver those projects too. So there's a lot of work ongoing. So as FS said, when we look at the broader projects, it's also about how can we cope with that delivery. And so you have to build that capacity in there. So there's lots of different strands that fit into that overall strategy. But I think we recognise that housing is a real challenge for people, and affordable accommodation too. So that's something that we had, Premier and I had lots of conversations with the FCDO around how could they support us in terms of what's next. And that's there's a lot to do, but I think some positive progress, Premier.
It is, and it's also critical because if you are undertaking large projects, I have the vision that we have to import people to the country. So in addition to providing houses for locals and diaspora members, you have to be able to accommodate the person who may come in to work on these projects. And so we have to make sure that we beef that up. Of course, David, you will recall that we did a consultation on housing development in Montserrat for the vulnerable people, and that was done. So we hope to use that instrument as part of a bargaining chip. But yes, of course, there's still a number of locals who have not yet been housed, who are still waiting. We have, as the Governor said, would have done some work on social housing during the past year and before. And we also have a small project in Drummond's where we are building two 3-bedroom apartments as part of and to put in some infrastructural work for additional housing in that area. So we are working, and of course, David understands that we need their assistance to do this, and they're working with us to get that done. Because you realize that if we have to increase our population, if we grow our population, we have to be able to say to them, if you come home, there is accommodation, whether it's private or whatever it is. And in the absence of suitable accommodation, then people will not return. And we're looking forward to people returning to Montserrat. But these are some of the areas that people would want to be assured of before they return to Montserrat. Housing is definitely one of those areas.
Thank you for that. And you mentioned access as well. Was there any discussion on ring fencing the budget for at least a year-round ferry service? And if so, were there numbers, like the arrivals, were numbers discussed with them in terms of getting budget for a year-round service for ferry?
What happens to ferry is a decision made by the Government of Montserrat, not necessarily DFID. FCDO does not make a decision when it comes to our budget. Yes, we consult. Yes, we tell what we are doing. But in terms of whether we have a year-round ferry or not, it's a decision made by Cabinet and Government of Montserrat. At the moment, we are collecting the data for we have a ferry for 5 months. We looked at December data, which I'll share Cabinet on Thursday. And then we have March. We look at those numbers because what we understand is that the peak season is really profitable in a sense, for ferry. After March 31st until October 31st, thereabout, the numbers doesn't spell out. So whether we have a ferry full-time or not, it's still work in progress. We believe that we can, but we have to be able to divert our, to have additional routes rather than just Antigua-Montserrat. Over the years, we focused so much on just one route and limit the capability of the ferry and also how much we can, the returns on the investment. So what I think, if we do have an all-year-round ferry, then clearly Access will have to start looking at other routes that can bring additional people into Montserrat, because ferry is very important for us, because it builds our tourism, it builds our trade and other things. It's very important, but you have to weigh it against whether, in fact, should I put those funds into another form of subsidy rather than just a ferry. So it's being worked on. There's no definite decision. But if you understand that if we come to them and say, yes, we will decide what we're doing, and they won't say no to us, it's just they want to do on the FS to find those monies and to tell us where to find it. That's
Forward FS has to find the money for everything. I think, thank you. Just to add to that, Premier, I think, so we had lots of discussions about access per se.
Yes.
And of course, the elephant in the room is always the airport. So I'll just cover that off now, just to save the question. So working with Government of Montserrat, we have to go through a process in terms of, you can't just ask for something and expect to get it. You have to build a business case for everything. And when it's something that's very expensive, you have to build a very big business case with lots of data. So on the airport, we've had a consultancy project done. We still haven't got the report, but hopefully soon we can sort that out. I've got the Royal Engineers coming in 2 weeks' time. They're going to have a look at the airport and they'll give a report in terms of what's available there. And then from there, Premier and I have discussions at Cabinet about what we want to do next, what government wants to do, and then that business case goes in. Because access is not just about getting to and from Antigua, as Premier says, it's about our economic development, it's about our growth. And so I would rather talk about what's the access strategy, which is what the team and the Premier's office are working on, rather than is it a ferry, is it a twin otter, is it, because that's not really a grown-up conversation. A grown-up conversation is what's the access strategy to give the best development opportunity for Montserrat, and then you build it from there. And it does depend on lots of different indicators. If you're going for the green economy and you want to have global tourism that's green, then you want electric this and low carbon that. But if you want to have just numbers, then you're going for capacity in terms of that. So the overarching strategy will drive that discussion, and then of course my office will support the Government of Montserrat in terms of whatever they want to develop, to put that forward to the FCDO. But these things take time. I know everybody wants everything yesterday, but if you want to get big development, it takes big data and big information, and that's what we're working together on.
And I wouldn't shy away, that's what Governor said, I wouldn't shy away from the idea that over the past years we have been looking at a short-term access decision. And I think we are now moving away into looking at a more longer-term decision. How can we transition from where we are and have a sort of, what is the end game for access, which is my word, of course. We need to develop that end game. So come to your strategy, you decide where do we go. Because we just cannot continue just speaking about a year-round ferry year after year. And the question again is, who? Well, these are these are the ideas that we are discussing and trying to develop into something going forward.
Thank you. There are millions of dollars in grants and financial aid that is provided towards the OECS and CARICOM member countries. Most times Montserrat doesn't benefit from something like that. Is there any consideration that will be given to rectify something like that? Because we are part of both OECS and CARICOM, but because we're an overseas territory, we might not qualify sometimes. Is there a way or a chance that this can be rectified?
This is something that we have raised time and time again. Because even though we are full members of CARICOM and OECS, depending on the funding streams and the conditions attached to those funding streams, OTs, overseas territories, are not beneficiaries. And sometimes some funding agents specify who can and cannot. And OECS, for instance, the IDB, IMF, FAO, we don't get support, financial support. We may be able to get some other resources, but when it comes to financial resources, we don't, because we are not in an independent country. And I've said to the UK, we are missing out, and not just as Governor said it before. If you calculate how much we have lost because we are an OT, if we were not an OT, then is there a means of you helping us? Because those agencies expect the UK, in addition to what we're getting for our budget, because we have budgetary support, and I'm very grateful for that. But they are saying, well, the UK is taking care of the OTs, which of course they are doing, but we're still losing out on those grant fundings that we could have benefited from. I don't know if there's a change. There'll be a change because we will remain an OT for quite a while. If the funders say that it is for development of independent countries, if it's USA, CEDA, they specify who benefits. And so sometimes it's very difficult to us to penetrate those funds. But as I said, they might give us some offshoot in terms of resources, but that's about it.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Premier. And I can understand the frustration sometimes too, but it's not because we're ODA, it's because we're OT and we're categorised under that. But it is for the donors to decide how they want to do their funding, and I'm sure there's lots of diplomatic conversations that continue. So that that's a route for that. But also, one of the big changes I think with the relationship with the UK government over the last sort of couple of years has been the cross-Whitehall relationship that we now have. So one of the things that we're looking at, and FS talked about this sort of bridging work, and Premier and I and ministers had long conversations about energy and how we might bridge that gap, and that might be a way of doing it. And the support that's offered there would be from DEFRA or from DESNES rather than from the Foreign Office and the ODA funding that we have there. So there are different funding routes across government that we're looking to get. And it's not just about the money, it is about the expertise. Often what you need is the real skills to come in and the training and development opportunities so that we can then do more for ourselves. So it's a mix. We can't replace like for like. It doesn't quite work that way. But we are seeking, working with Premier and FS and my team in the office to try and make sure that we capitalise as much as we can. And some ministries are really good at that. You know, if I look at Marley and the work that they do with Darwin and with JNCC, they have a lot of funding routes that go through there, which is outside the general overspend that we have, that supports our fisheries and our marine development and some of the land stuff. And you know, National Trust manages to tap into that, and other people too. So there are lots of other funding routes, and we try and make sure that we post as many on our governor's page so people can see those funding routes to apply. So it's not an easy one to resolve, but there are other routes that we're starting to tap into, which I hope will be beneficial for Montserrat, because that's what we're there to deliver.
And I think over the last year, there's a paradigm shift. Previously, our focus was on what can the FCDO do for us. Last year, we took a mission to London, and we had meetings with a number of ministries and partners across Whitehall. You would recall that the Prime Minister Sunak has also instructed his ministries and departments to have a lead on OT matters within there. So what we have now is not just depending on FCDO for support, as the governor said, but we can talk to education, we talk to trade, we talk to culture, you know, we can talk to everybody, and resources, not only cash, but human resources can be coming. And that's what we need, because we do have a capacity problem in Montserrat. And in respect to what we think, we will not be able to make it and deliver on our promises unless we have those support coming in. So we're happy that across Whitehall, whether it's in the opposition, whether it's members of the House of Lords, we can tap into everybody and get support. And that is important for us, because the history was that we only talked to FCDO.
Yeah.
That has changed significantly.
Really changed.
Right. So you're saying that this took effect as of last year, that across Whitehall relationship that we now have?
So it's always been there, but it's been less formalised, shall we say. So it's been based on personalities, if I'm honest. So if you know somebody in the Cabinet Office, you can get hold of them and get this, or you know somebody there. Now it's been formalised. Prime Minister has put a dictate out, and under Lord Goldsmith, actually, we got quite a lot of traction through that. And now with Minister Rutley, you know, he chairs a cross-Whitehall group of overseas ministers, so they've all been allocated within that. We've got a new international policing unit that's been set up in the Home Office. Next week we've got Home Office coming to do cybersecurity with us. You know, so different departments are now proactively. I mean, it will mean more visitors, so you know that's a good thing for our economy, I suppose. It's a bit heavy for us on workload, but more people coming in to help us. So it's been more formalised in the last year, and I think because of the mission that undertook last January, and then again when we went we had 2 JMCs last year, which was heavy, but it gave us opportunity to mix again with different people. And in November there were more meetings then, so tourism and different fractions, so we can start to really tap into those. The challenge comes whether we've got the capacity to take the work forward, actually. So where people are knocking on our door because we've been to see them and we can't actually respond quick enough. So one of the other things is building that capacity here quickly, and if that's borrowing people or you know, hiring people in for a few months while we get going, that's what we'll have to do to make sure that we don't lose that momentum.
Right. So
one important aspect of that relationship is that, and to use my mantra, I ask people in London, what does it mean to be part of the UK family? And I think this brings it out that we are we're no longer isolated, but across Whitehall, the information, the knowledge of who the OTs are is now being spread across. Previously, I wondered whether in fact parliamentarians knew what the OTs. I think now they are in a better position to understand us and we can approach them. And so and thanks again to the Speaker, of course, who is also ready, Speaker Hall, who is very aggressive in making sure the OT's name is spread across Whitehall. So, and we do have an office at the Whitehall now. The OTs have an office that we use on a weekly basis if we want to. So it's really meshing, really changed, to be honest.
Right, so I'm hearing a lot about individuals coming in as well. What about going out, persons from Montserrat going to the UK, to some of these government ministries and departments for a period of time as part of a system of understudying the system there? Yeah,
absolutely. And we mentioned last week about Hannah coming over and spending a week working for the FS and Deputy FS, which she loved, by the way. She didn't want to leave. And we've already agreed that somebody will go back the other way and do that, and we'll keep looking for those opportunities. Obviously, I've had Acting Commissioner in from BVI, because it's not just about the UK either, it's across OTs where we can do that. So we're seeking as many opportunities. There are some challenges sometimes, I'll be absolutely honest, over security. So if you go to work in Whitehall in the Foreign Office, then you've got to have security clearance to be in there. Yeah. Otherwise, quite frankly, it's quite painful being escorted everywhere. But we can overcome some of those things, and we will do, and make sure that we get that cross-fertilisation. And it's not just about people from here going to the UK or to other overseas territories to learn. It's also to share our knowledge. Mm-hmm. You know, we have best practice in a lot of areas actually that we don't shout about, and we should. So making sure that we can share the work that we do too will help others. And across OTs, I mean, we work across a lot of different OTs and share our knowledge there too, which is really helpful.
As the Governor said, it's not just the UK, because in my Christmas message I did mention that we had this exchange program, because I long, as a public servant prior to my being here, I long advocate that we should be having these kind of exchanges between public servants to at least give us an outlook as to what public is really like. And I was in Gibraltar in August, and the OTs met and decided exactly that we start looking at exchanges between OTs, not just the UK, but the OTs as well. So we have the opportunity, we have to make use of it. What I want to make sure is that when people go overseas, that they return.
Absolutely, and that we have the capacity here in the first place to send them, and that's one of the challenges at the moment. We've got to get our numbers up so that we can then release people to go and do their training.
Yes, and speaking of people returning, the population growth right now is an issue. In fact, it's a concern for many persons that the population is declining. Of course, we have to wait the official census report, but anyone who is observant enough can see that we don't have a lot of bodies on the ground that we once had. So that is an issue that persons are concerned about. Has that factored into any of your budget discussions and how to deal with that going forward for Montserrat's economic growth and all of that? Surely.
As we say in colloquial terms, it's a chicken and egg situation. For the economy to grow, you have to have people. But if you don't have people, the economy will not grow. So it's really dicey, because if your company wants to come to Montserrat and they don't want 100 persons and they can't find them, then they're not going to come. So we have to grow the population and grow the economy. And I think, if you notice, last 2 weeks ago, I think it was December, we actually amended the immigration legislation to make sure that people who want to work in Montserrat, people with, of course, who are vetted and qualified to work in Montserrat, come as a visitor, and you want to transition from visitor status to working status, and that is now in law. We have just done secondary legislation last week, I think. So that is it. We now streamlining the immigration department to make it easier. We are hoping that members from diaspora would offer to come to Montserrat. We have a number of vacancies in Montserrat. We offer the jobs. I'm not seeing, there's a little take-up, to be honest. Yes, I was very pleased last week. At least 2 persons returned to Montserrat, 2 positions. I'm very pleased with that. And I would like to see more people. The question and the concerns raised by especially young people, I understand that young people need fast life. But I would want one of them to do something, some nightlife. One of those young people around, come in, let's work together. How can we help you? And if you want a disco, whatever it is, I'm just being frank. Start something to attract the young people so that when they work during the day, they can go somewhere. Because that's you have heard it, that there's nothing to deny. So I would want to support any young people who want to do something so that we can attract our young people back. But that's where we are, and we're really concerned about the population. I don't think it's as bad as we are thinking, but let's see what the figures say when it comes out. Yes, it's a concern for us as well, because, and again, I'm here, we have an old population, elderly population. That is not very good for us, because you want able-bodied people, and of course, people who can make children.
Yeah.
No, I'm being honest. I'm just being honest.
No, it's right, and it was part of the discussions in terms of because it impacts on when you look at budgetary aid and you look at the number of people that's split across, then it looks a very high number, but of course it's not, because you still have to deliver all those services, whether there's 100 people or 4,000 people or 8,000 people. So it does have an impact, and one of the things that we're trying to, all different routes in terms of how can we build that capacity on island. As Premier says, government have changed immigration rules, which I think is a really positive move, and we're looking at other things too. I'm looking at how I can steal people from other overseas territories. What can we do to try and bring people in? And actually, this weekend, a quick plug, but we've got the Permanent Undersecretary from the Foreign Office, so the head of the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, Sir Philip Barton, is coming in for a couple of days, because I spoke to him when I was back in the UK, and Premier and I, talking about some of the capacity challenges we've got here, but also some of the great work that's here. So he's coming in to have a visit on Friday and Saturday. So if you see Premier and I herring around, that's what we're doing, trying to give him a whistle-stop tour of the island, but also to try and get some support in a different way, and that is about the capacity to bring in, because if you can bring the skills to help people build some of these social development areas that we might want to have, nightlife. I mean, I'm a bit too old for discos, but whatever it is that people want, then the expertise that might be there to help them develop that. So working with culture or something like that. So definitely part of the conversation, and it does make it more challenging in terms of funding. the less people, but you need more money, not less. So we had quite an in-depth conversation on that.
This question is for the FS. Montserrat has achieved a surplus over the years. What is this based on, and is this a sign that the economy is improving here?
Achieved a surplus? What did you ask? Sorry, repeat.
Surplus, yes.
Budget.
Oh. The surplus, well, it can mean a lot of things. Usually, it means in our circumstances, we have a lot of vacancies on roll that are funded and we're unable to fill. It's not usually the case that ministries and departments aren't able to spend the operational funds, but the PE aspect of it usually is a bit slow given the rate of recruitment. It personal emoluments, those salaries. I can also add that on the revenue side, we have been collecting a little bit more than forecast this year and last, and that also helped to build a surplus.
Well, one good thing about the surplus is that previous years we had no way of using those funds. And in one of the discussions last year in FCDO in May last year, I raised the point that they are not encouraging me to raise any additional funding, because if the surplus, if we have no control, no say over the surplus, then it doesn't help me. And I think we have agreed that the surplus will be used for local projects in consultation with FCDO, of course.
Yes.
But we can now use whatever surplus we have. We can then, with different discussion, use those funds. It's not about they're going back to nowhere, but we can use those funds now for our projects that were not in the pipeline. We can now develop projects and use those funds for it. So at least that's an advantage for us.
Yes, so that was a conversation on how we manage reserves.
Yes.
And so going forward, we will be able to keep those excess funds within our account without it affecting any future settlement.
Right.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is for the Premier. With the budget performing well over the last couple of years, is there consideration given for a tax break for workers?
That's a tough one. I'm not sure the budget was performing well over the past years, because from my understanding, we were carrying deficit budgets for quite a while, unknown to some of us, of course, until it was revealed. So it wasn't that the budget was performing well. I think last year, of course, we did a little better last year, and this year. Government, there's a lot of pressure on the budget. The demand on the social agenda, for instance, more and more persons are coming on social welfare. That is one line budget that every quarter or thereabout we have to do a supplementary appropriation to top up. Because persons are traveling for medicals, people are traveling for, people need additional assistance, and even when we send people for medicals, those funds are not coming back in. So it's basically the government investing in our people, of course, but those not coming back in. So there's a lot of pressure on the budget. For instance, we have a maintenance of our buildings, assets, we cannot tackle for a long time. We have roads that are not being repaired. So even though it seems as though there's some progress in the budget, there's still demand on it. To answer the question, though, government is looking at options as to what we can do. And I think my budget statement may reveal some of those options. And that's what I will say.
As it relates to the budget performance, we tend only to look on one side. So yes, we may have a surplus. And as we said in the past, it was difficult to reallocate those funds. But we have, and based on the last Legislative Assembly meeting, the reporting was that we may see a surplus this year, but we have commitments exceeding more than 5 times the surplus. So it's just to put it in context. So while it is we may see a surplus for this year, we also have commitments. It's just that we're sort of limited because you have to be able to spend by the end of the financial year.
And there are a number of statutory bodies that government is committed to, We cannot allow MUL to fall through. We can't allow Social Security to fall through. And these are also demand. Any surplus, we have to inject additional funds, which were not budgeted for at the beginning financial year. So yes, there might be some surplus, but the demand is there to use them. And I kind of go back to speaking for MUL. MUL needs significant injection of funds, and we have to find those funds from within whatever we have. Social Security also, because we committed to make sure that we safeguard Social Security People's Fund pension. And last year we injected $1.8 million, and this year we did this financial we did another 500,000, and there's still need for additional inputs. So yes, the public may say there's funds, and we look at it from one side, but there's huge demand on the budget. And I agree that last year we gave public servants a 3% increase. I guess I thought you would ask me that as well. We will see what we can do, what we do. I don't know what we can do, but we'll announce what we announce when it comes to budget time. But I understand the pressure that public servants all of us are under, that the cost of living is going up. We do understand that. And we are living here and we understand. And whatever we can do to alleviate the difficulties that we are facing, we will work it out.
Okay, so I'll continue the discussion. Paulisa, feel free to interject at any point if you want to ask additional questions. I know you said it was your final, but as we continue, you may, have additional. Right, so going back to your opening statements, and I'm thinking back on Thursday as well, the word bold, a bold ask, and I'm really pushing to see if we can have some indication of what that means for us. You may not want to go into the granular details of what that bold ask is, but on a macro level, what are we talking about here?
So
not a figure, definitely.
Not a figure, definitely not. No, we wouldn't share that. But from my perspective, seeing it, I say it was my second time sitting through a sort of budget support mission and working with the teams on this. What I felt was different was the strategic approach. So it is about we've got a direction of travel, and we've got things that we need to do, and this is the ask to deliver them. Now, what comes back then it's about, well, okay, with that budget we can do this, and the more you get, the more you can do, obviously within the capacity lines. But I think it was bold in terms of really addressing the priority areas and doing it in detail. So that for me was very bold to say, look, these are really the challenges that we have, and lots of robust discussion about whether they were the real challenges or not, and where we got to, and then therefore the resolution for that is this, and the interlink with them. So lots of things that are connected, as we said about, access is connected to tourism, is connected to development. So showing those connections and saying that why it was bold is if we want to solve this problem, actually all of these other things sit within it. So it wasn't an isolated, can we have a plane, can we have a ferry? It was, we want to develop Montserrat, and therefore this is what we need to do that. So I think, as Premier says, no figures, but it was a much more, for me, a much more strategic discussion in terms of where we want to get to. And FCDO, because they'd been out in the summer and done their sort of mid-year review, it meant that we didn't have to get into that nitty-gritty of what have we done this year, So the whole thing was different, and their questions are, I think, forgive me, Rahi, if you're watching, but we'd always like to take him to the chair and stop him asking questions. He's very he delves in much detail, but there was a lot of knowledge about that too, and a lot of frank conversations about, well, if you want us to do this, we need to do that. So I think it was bold, both in terms of financial, and it was bold in financial, but it was very bold in terms of the ambition for Montserrat, and that's from all the work the ministries have done, the government has done, and my departments have done together to say, actually, this is where we think we could get to. So that would be my... Yeah,
I totally agree. And what you didn't see was ministries and departments lobbying for themselves, but rather how do they fit into the bigger picture. That was strategic. That was very important. So how does access work with agriculture? How does agriculture fit into healthcare? How does healthcare fit into that? And that is the picture. And we were bold in that. Over the years, we tend to limit our ask and say, well, yes, we got that last year, so maybe we don't get this year. Now we throw everything on the table. This is what it takes to rebuild the health sector, to rebuild the roads, to rebuild maintenance. This is real cost. And you come back to us and tell us what you want to give us. And that, to me, is bold.
What I can add is that we developed some scenarios around the ask. So we indicated, for instance, that there needs to be significant investment in order to prevent collapse of the economy. And you also need to inject significant investment if we want to encourage growth. So that's the sort of approach we took. There's some things that has to be done, otherwise we'll collapse. And there's something that has to be done to sustain us and to lead us towards growth. So that's the approach we took.
Okay. So I know last year we had a 25% increase from the previous year. So hopefully, based on the bold ask, we should be seeing an increase. I know you're not giving any figures, but we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see.
I have to say the global economy has a big impact on that at the moment with everything that's
Absolutely.
happening.
But
Yes, but we do the best we can.
Absolutely. So FCDO, when do we expect to hear back from them in terms of the request made? We're in mid-January now, and you would need this in time for the new financial year, which is April 1st.
It's always a scramble, Fiona. Let's be honest. So,
Okay.
so the team will have gone back. They've still got a lot of questions which will come across to the team, which we'll respond to. We'll all be doing our own lobbying as we do, and then and they put to ministers, and that has to be a considered effort. And I don't know the timings in the FCDO. I don't know yet, but we'll find those out. They know our budget timetable. They know when we would like to have it. We would like to not be late with budget. But I can't guarantee that. But certainly my job will be to push the FCDO to make sure that we get a response in time, but that we allow them enough time to lobby strategically for us to get the very best. I think. Sorry, I was just going to say the other thing is that it's not just about that settlement that we get at that time. And again, credit to all the ministries for the work they've done, departments, to make sure that we have business cases ready. So one of the conversation was about, and what else can you have on the blocks? You know, we've talked at length about the additional equipment we got for health and for energy in this last financial year. But the more that we're ready when funding becomes available, because it does get released through the year, then we can bid for that too. So the initial settlement is not where we end up at the end of the year. So whatever we get, we then build on that and the capital underneath. The other thing that we don't do is ever put a price on the capability. Nor should we, but we should recognise that there is value in them sending people out to help us, or us being able to tap into different expertise. And again, the boldness of the ask was also about, we don't want money in that area. What we want is expertise. What we want is help with the strategy. Or what we want is help with implementation, or we want help with recruitment. So it was also about some of those capability asks too. But I think, well, FS will tell me when she thinks we're going to get the budget. But I think back into March.
Yeah. Well, hopefully before the back end of March.
Yeah, I was going to stress the point that public need to understand that there's a process from where we start talking to FCDO until we get the actual letters say this is what we approve. And so when they come to us, they just don't come back and go back and send money. They have to discuss with us, discuss with their team, their finance team, and they have to go to the Treasury, and they come back to us with questions. So it's not just the money we're sitting in FCDO. They don't have the money. It has to come from the UK Treasury. And so our people need to understand that there's a process that we have to go through. It may take a while, of course. But I agree that with the government also that in addition to what we have asked, from time to time things will come up. For instance, last year we had $3 million on critical equipment. For us, MOL was one of those things. So from time to time, we need to have projects and business case ready, which is what I think the PMO and the office and the FS and the office is doing, so that at least if there's any PM money, any loose cash around, and we can say, yes, we are ready, have it. And in that case, you will get something more than what you really bargained for in the original discussion. And this is what we have to do. It's a tactics that we have developed over the year, like we need to do this and be ready for those things. It's falling in place now.
Okay. SIPREG obviously featured as a major part of the budget discussions, budget support mission discussions. SIPREG 1, as FS would have mentioned, is coming to an end. What does SIPREG 2 look like? Have you started to identify possible projects for SIPREG 2, or is it going to be a continuation of some of the existing projects? What does that look like?
FS.
So SIPREG 1 started out with a particular basket of projects, but it didn't quite end up that way, because you found that we had to respond to emergent needs on the ground. So you have, so SIPREG 2 will pick up the slack from where SIPREG 1, the original intent of SIPREG 1 fell off, and also add some additional ones that have come in. So you have things like roads, social housing, the geothermal and energy, a big maintenance project, the hospital transformation, not the building, but the soft side, lots of other major equipment that we need on the ground that we can't deal with on the recurrent side. But there is an element of project in every department. So you have agriculture, MCWLE, education, health, all of them. So it's a huge package, and what we need to now do is to sit down and refine those, decide what the priorities are, while we develop the business case for CIPREG 2. We don't have, for instance, specific projects quite yet, but we have concept areas that will go forward and look at digitization, for instance, but what in digitization we haven't yet developed, and those discussions will occur during this year.
Okay, and CIPREG 1, and I know we're using the acronyms, and I'm just going to say it out fully because I am aware that some persons are listening and who may not be familiar with some of these acronyms that we use. So it's the Capital Investment Program for Resilient Economic Growth, CIPREG. CIPREG 1 comes to an end in what year?
2025.
That's next year.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so we will have CIPREG 2 coming shortly thereafter.
We're
We're
hoping. We're hoping. So because there's no certainty, and because we are also conscious that in the UK it's election year.
Okay.
So we're starting the discussions, but we're not sure when CIPREG 2 will actually begin.
Okay.
What's positive on that, though, I think, is that the discussions now that ministries and government are having with the FCDO is about the concept and then developing that business case. Whereas before it was, okay, we're going to do a program. Now we've got to chase our tails to do the business cases, and then other things came in. There's much more time now to build solid business cases, but also much more knowledge about, once you start doing this sort of work, everything comes out of the woodwork and you start to see other things that need to be done. So we had to do the airport, and we had to do the runway and things. So having an awareness of what some of those challenges might be, I think, is really positive. And say building the business cases now as we go forward, and then for government to decide what it is that they want to ask. But election year, as FS said here, this year or next year, whatever Premier decides, and Mr Sunak has said the back end of the year, so we wait and see. But actually across the world, and that really will shift the dice, I think, next year. We've got something like 40 major elections next year, so that's it's a huge shift across the world. So wait and see what happens with that too.
I think we have learned from CIPREG 1. As FS said, there was a basket of projects, but there were no defined business case, and it kind of slows us down because personally I wanted CIPREG 1 to come to an end this year. I thought by now the hospital would have been completed, but because there was just a basket of projects and the business cases were not written. So as we prioritize, when we came to office, we had to prioritize which ones we wanted to go through, and then things happen. For instance, the airport resurfacing was not part of that package of goods. The airport control tower was not part of that package of goods. So these came in, and there were no business cases. So it took us a while to develop those cases and have the steering committee approve them. So it can delay the implementation of those projects. What we are seeing now is that we will begin to write, once we identify those specific projects, we begin to write our business cases, so that when funding comes in stream, we are ready to push with it. And of course, our capacity has to help us along with that.
Okay, right. So in terms of the other areas that were discussed, I have here food sovereignty, and that is a term that we are not familiar with, in the sense that we previously spoke about food security, but I'm noticing a shift towards food sovereignty. What is that about? What's the difference now between food security and this new term that we're hearing coming out of the budget support mission now, food sovereignty? What does that mean for Montserrat?
I must admit that the Director of Agriculture made a fantastic presentation.
He did, yeah.
Okay.
For me, as my background, fantastic presentation, and I totally agree with him. Food security is a political terminology. We want to be food security, but there's no such thing as food security. And he made the analogy where the government of Montserrat can build a warehouse and import goods and just issue it to people, and you get food. That's food security because you have food. Food sovereignty is that you're able to produce some specific crops and have them available, affordable, and that kind of thing. Yeah. And to me, it was a very good analogy that he used. We're not talking about food security because you cannot achieve food security. Yes, CARICOM developed that notion of food security because we were emotional, I think. But I prefer the term food sovereignty, that you can grow certain crops and make them available to your population at affordable prices and at different times, rather than having that. And I think that is important. So food sovereignty is slightly different to food security. In that food sovereignty, you are producing your own, you identify what you produce, how you produce it, you select your farmers, and control the production of those crops, which makes sense to me.
And where food sovereignty is concerned now, I mean, that is a critical part of the cost of living situation that we're facing here in Montserrat, because we import so many things from overseas. In the strategic discussions around this subject, do you see us being in a position to reduce our importation anytime within a 5-year period? Because that, I think, would help to lower the cost of living.
I think so. I think one of the challenges at the moment is actually some of our locally produced is more expensive than the imports because of farming methods. So again, Dr. Maloney did a really good presentation on this. But some of the development work the Ministry are doing on hydroponics, and that there are cheaper and more effective ways of growing crops and animal farming that going forward. So a lot of their strategy is about how do you develop that, how do you get that expertise, how do you support our farmers to be able to do that. And again, that's an ask back to the UK for expertise in terms of how do you do that. So I think yes. I also think people want to know the provenance of their food, so you want to know where it's come from. So if shopkeepers are listening, if they could put a label on their local crops, I think we'd all really welcome that, because I would rather buy a local potato than I would one that's been halfway around the world before it gets here. So I think having that knowledge and that support. And then it's about trade. Again, it goes back to that strategic level about how do we develop the whole thing. So what is the trading arrangement then that local farmers have? How do we sell to shopkeepers? How do we export if we can, if we've got a surplus? So again, Government of Montserrat have looked at this strategic level in terms of across ministries. How can we develop that as part of our development package rather than just so food sovereignty is part of that, and it linked into health as well, didn't it, Ramir, in terms of other things there. So yes, I think we can, but it's hard work, and we're going to need to change perhaps a little bit of how we operate. And again, it changes hard, but I think the ministry, the minister and the director of agriculture have got some fantastic ideas in there.
And again, it goes back to capacity, because and systems of operation. Because we were accustomed to open field operations. Our farmers are older, so the ministry spoke about recruiting young farmers with new technology, which is the way forward, so that it costs you less to produce, and of course, high density in the areas. But we have to first of all recruit those young farmers into the system. They are not there, and that is help. And again, it is the relationship between all of those areas, because if you have food sovereignty, then you can reduce your NCDs. And so your health system is strengthened. You can, your children at school will benefit because the health will. So it's tying all of this into one. I think that's where we have to look at it, rather than just looking at isolated ministries and departments, but rather to do.
Right, that holistic picture of what's happening. Right, and as it relates to capacity, I know, and capability, I know you'd have spoken about the relationship with UK departments. So how does DEFRA, which is the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, how would that factor into our vision towards food security, food sovereignty rather?
So I think that's for government here to define the ask. So certainly in DEFRA also do water and waste work. So there we've defined the ask, and they're supporting. So it's for the ministry and the teams to define what it is they need, and then they will work with DEFRA. They're really proactive in reaching out. In fact, I hear from them quite a lot saying, what can we do, which is great. So it's really for us to make sure that we know what it is, what support we need, and then tap into that. So whether that's farming methods, whether that's about recruitment, whether it's about crops, whatever it is, or whether it's the linkage with health and education, as Premier says. So trying to make sure that we really, you sort of get what you ask for. So we've got to really know what we want. And I think that's the challenge sometimes, is having the capacity here to sit and think and write. This is actually what our requirement is. But they, we have a raft of expertise there that can support us. So working with the government, we'll define that ask and see what we can do.
Energy. We know that energy is another area that we have to somehow transition to green energy. We know we have a target of 2030, and we know the situation here with power outages and so forth. What did the conversation around energy look like during the budget support mission, and what are you hoping to get coming out of those discussions?
Can I go first?
We have, in fact, discussed energy. It's high on the agenda. As a matter of fact, we have been speaking to Net Zero. Net for the past year in terms of support for our green revolution, our green area. Like geothermal, for instance. And they have been very supportive, as a matter of fact. You'll recall that the Ministry of Commerce and Works set an ITT in terms of identifying. They have identified an individual, but we realized that we do need support from the UK to assist us to build that plan, that program. So they are in fact working with us through the Ministry of Commerce and Works and Energy, working with them to make sure that we get what we want. I can't say it's going to be tomorrow. The process could be long, but at least they're in it with us, and we're working together. And we also look at different, not just geothermal, which is the talk, but other elements of geothermal like solar and wind. I think they look at a wind study and other things. So it's a combination of, because you know what happens in the tropics, whatever happens, whenever it happens. So we have to do that combination. And I think the Division of Energy is working on it with the Minister to make sure that we get what we want. Of course, we are suggesting to FCDO that they may have to invest some grant funding into the system. So we are waiting to hear what happens.
Right, and I think I recall you speaking, Premier, in one of your responses here this afternoon about social services, and more persons are coming under social services or requiring support there. Was an assessment done to determine why that is the case and how we can help persons to not require service?
Well, I don't know that this start. I know we also do a household survey. I think some element of it will come out in the data collected from households in terms of how they're making it, how they some of that will come out. So once it's analyzed, then I guess we'll get a sneak preview as to what is something. But we believe, we understand from our own, without having the data available to us, which is important to have the data. But we know, you and I work and we understand what shopping prices are looking like. And persons in the low income bracket, clearly, if they are waiting and they don't have an income, then clearly they will fall through the cracks, and that's our concern. Of course, the FCDO understand that the vulnerable need to be taken care of. Persons living alone and have children, and they don't have an income, and they're coming into government for one-offs or whatever it is. And you know, that is where we are. But we understand that the cost of living is gone up. What we really need here is some education program to assist persons to manage their finances. And some of us strive very hard to manage it, but there are others who just need a guidance as to how best to manage what we have and what not to buy or what to buy in terms of nutrition and other things, rather than just buying things. Sometimes you're forced to buy little things that really don't help you, whereas you could use that money and buy something else. Maybe you don't like it, but but just like the education as well. So we have to factor everything into the mix. But we do know that persons are suffering some difficulties.
Right.
You know that.
And then there's, there are some who are just unemployed who haven't found work yet. So we're hopeful. FS mentioned about the port project. They're doing a big recruitment drive. The hospital project will come online, so there'll be more there. So, hope that people will take those opportunities. And I know with the port project, Minister Joseph, Premier, and I spoke to the team down at Meridian about the training that they're going to offer. So they will offer some training down there in terms of upskilling people, both as part of the workforce, but actually for people that are not part of the workforce that want to go along and learn. So one of the things that we try and do with the projects is make sure that there's some capacity building within there and some opportunities. I know we've had women and youth down there on the trucks and done that sort of stuff. I have a forklift truck licence, so I recommend it to anybody. But I think, the more opportunities we can open like that to show people different roles as well. I think, traditional roles may not be there, but there may be some different opportunities for employment. So we need to encourage people and then make sure that it's a livable wage so that people can support themselves. So I know that's something that government are looking at.
What I would want to know whether, who are those persons who, as you already asked, who are experiencing hardship? And who are those persons on the welfare? Are they able-bodied persons who can work, and why not? Because people are saying that they can't find people to work. It depends on the job. Sometimes you have to retool individuals to suit certain jobs. And if you are a mason and you can do carpentry, then fine. And as we said, I spoke to the company on Friday. Was it Friday? Yeah. And they are opening recruitment. I know there's going to be at Salem Primary School School. We are now rehabilitating that building. I passed it yesterday. So there's some work there, whatever they need. Yeah. We're looking at, of course, the hospital project. The Max Memorial, which will fit in Max Memorial, it's on. I passed it yesterday afternoon. Work is going on. So there's some work. The question is Is there work and some people not going for it? I don't know. I'm not asking saying so, but there might be job. But again, what are they paying? Because your inflation is not, your wage is not rising in line with the cost of living,
Right.
and that's the problem we have. But we understand, and there's no comfort to us. But Montserrat is not the only place where things are bad. There's no comfort to all of us, of course, but it's a worldwide problem. But as FS said, the projection is that the economies of the world seem to be doing a little better. Hopefully, certain international developments don't escalate, so at least we're in a worse position than we are right now.
Right. Okay. Paulisa, anything else from you? All right. At this point, I'll ask for final comments from the head table, starting with FS, then Premier, ending with the Governor. Thank you.
Yes, just so as to reiterate, we really hope that we put our best foot forward as it relates to our budget ask, and we made and reiterate a very bold ask for significant investment into the economy. We appreciate all the efforts from across government, from the FCDO, because they also have to go through a similar procedure in terms of building their business case, and as much help as we can give them to build the business case on our behalf, we will, within the coming weeks, from the Ministry of Finance, be supporting. But thanks to all across government, the Governor's Office, the Premier, and all ministers for the input into the discussions last week.
Yeah, I do want to express my thanks and appreciation to all the stakeholders from ministries and departments, Governor's Office, FCDO, but more so Ministry of Finance. You're not praising yourself, I'll just say that. They've worked exceptionally hard to make sure that this BSM came off effectively. I know at nights they are down here or someplace working, and I was very impressed with the new team. When I came here first, they were shy and not knowing what to do. They were bold and brave last week, presenting the budget, the budget, the information to us. I want to thank them very much for it. Of course, we are waiting with bated breath. I'm very optimistic that we will get something good coming out this year. Maybe not all that we need, but we will have to make do. But I'm hoping that we get more than last year.
Thanks, Premier. Just to add to that, reiterate my thanks as well. I know that, as Premier said, the Ministry of Finance worked incredibly hard, as did everybody across ministries, but they really did go above and beyond. And it was great to see, actually, across all the ministries and departments, different people coming in who really know their stuff and presenting. So thank you and well done to them. I also want to just say that it's not just about government and government employees either. So we met with private sector and charities and legal and financial side as well, and their input is also very, very valuable, and that comes as part of the mix. So we encourage them to continue to feed in, and it is a whole of government approach. I think everybody did their best, so we have to wait and see. I'll certainly do my part now with government and with Ministry of Finance to see that we get everything ready and we get the very best we can. But just thank you to everybody for all the hard work they put in. It was, as I say, it was exhausting. I said that last week. It really was exhausting. But I think where we got to by Friday evening was that we were all very proud of the work that everybody had done, and I don't think we can do any more than that. And I think as long as we've done our very best, and that's the best that we could ask of anybody. So a huge thank you to all the public service for the work they've done.
And thank you to our listeners and viewers for tuning in to today's media discussion on the budget support mission, which concluded here in Montserrat last week. I am Fiona Alexander Smith. Have a good afternoon.